Hey guys, Tim here with a RodLab tutorial, and what I'd like to show you this time is how to manually enter a rod taper into the program. And this would be helpful if you had maybe a rod taper in a book or one of your own that was on paper, and even maybe more useful if you had one that you found online and you'd be able to cut and paste things in. So let's go ahead and open the program, and from here I'm going to click on this Enter New Taper button. And this brings up the Enter New Taper window. You see there's a lot we might have to enter in here. Fortunately, I've selected one that we already have online, which will save us a little bit of trouble. This is a Morris Kushner taper on the Classic Fly Rod Forum. And this one's interesting because not only do I have taper information here, but I also have some guide spacing. So I will show you how to get both of those in. And to make it easy, I'm going to go ahead and copy this text here and bring it over into my program. I'm going to make some notes here. I want to know where I found it in case I have to go back and ask questions later, and I'll just paste everything into the notes. It'll be easy to get at. So let's start with my taper information here, and I'm going to copy this. Oop, I missed some. I'm going to copy this right out and drop it in here. And if you notice, I've got a couple of things. I've got station and I've got dimension. So I'm going to go ahead and click the station and dimension. Some other websites I may actually get stress mixed in there as well, and I want to be able to ignore that. And this would be if I had a rod that was rectangular that had both two different dimensions in it. But I don't. I've got these two, so I'm going to go ahead and click the read box button. And when I do that, you'll see the taper comes in. It's plotted down here, and here are my numbers. So first thing you'll notice, it's actually reversed. In most tapers are actually 0 is the tip. In RodLab, 0 is the butt, and the tip is the last point. So RodLab knows, is smart enough to look at this, what you've pasted in here, and figure out which is the butt end, which is the tip end, and reverse it if necessary. But you'll see we still have a problem because I only had 5 foot 8 inches of information here, but it's a 6 foot 3 inch rod. So likely somebody couldn't measure underneath the handle. So to make that better, we're going to go ahead and put in the correct length here, and I'm going to hit read box again, and it comes up with a warning to tell me that it added a little bit of length at the butt section to compensate for the correct length. And that's fine, but this probably gives me some wrong numbers here, so I'm going to guess. I don't really know these numbers, but I'm going to add a point in between, and I'm going to say maybe it's a little bit bigger. I don't know the correct number here, but we'll go with this. Call it 260, and I'm going to come back up here now. I've got the correct length. I've got a taper in here. It is a hexagonal cross section. I don't need to change that. And it's a 2-piece rod. Let's go ahead and mark that, and when I do that, it's going to go ahead and pick a ferrule for me based on this taper and the number of rod pieces, and I get this note that I need to enter a valid line weight. The reason for that being that in order to pick guides, I need to know how big of a line I'm using to know what size guides to pick. So I'm going to go ahead and pick a 4-weight line. I'll come back here and say auto pick guides, and now it'll come up and it'll pick the guide set and guide spacing, basically the program's best guess. Next thing I'll do, I'll put in a casting distance. 30 is standard. I always put in 30. We'll talk about this more later and why that is. Tip-top grains, I don't really know for this one. I'm going to leave it at 8. It's a decent standard value. Same thing for varnish density. The grip pivot point is where you're grabbing the handle with your hand, and it doesn't matter for translating a taper, but it will matter, or at least have some effect when you're doing a bend form. So having done that, let's come back to the guides here. Now, as I mentioned, in this taper we've already got some guide spacing information, so let's grab that out, and it's going to be different than what we already guessed at with the program, so I'll copy that here, and I'm going to paste it back over here. So you'll see I have this guide spacing text. That's going to be ignored. It's not numeric. What I also have is fractional information. A lot of guide spacing you'll get is fractional, and if it's a guide, this won't work for station or dimension, but for guides, if you have fractional information, RodLab will automatically turn that into decimal and calculate it. So I've selected guides, and I'm going to hit read box. And when I do, it goes ahead and adjusts the guide spacing for what I have here. I'm using a 2-foot guide set. I could go to 1 foot, which would give me smaller bases and a little bit lower weight, but I'm guessing Kushner probably used a 2-foot wire guide. So I'll stick with that. And you'll notice down here in my my plot, I've actually got little diamonds to show me where the guides are located. And if I didn't know, I could go ahead and play with this and change the spacing factors. But since I already have it, I'm going to leave that alone. If this were taken from a varnished rod, I would come in here and have to make some guesses about how much I would want to subtract off the taper for a varnish. So maybe 4 thousandths at the tip and maybe even up to 6 thousandths at the butt. And having put that in, if I hit this button to apply the adjustment, it would automatically subtract it from this taper. But this is already an adjusted taper, I believe, so we're not going to do that. And a couple more things to talk about that are important for the hollow wall. This represents a 1-inch thick hollow wall. However, obviously this taper is much less than 1 inch, so this is effectively a solid rod and I don't have to touch anything here. For the tooling we're using to hollow it, because it's a solid rod, it doesn't matter. It just picks some default tooling that I've already configured, so it won't affect. You could put anything here, it has no effect. And the final thing is this OB ratio. And this is actually related to a rectangular cross-section rod. This would give me a ratio of stiffness in side to side versus the casting plane. But since it's not, it's a hexagonal rod, it doesn't have any effect on anything, and I'm just going to leave that alone. So the final thing I have to do is I have to give this taper a name. And now that I'm done, I'm going to hit the Save Taper button down here. And that will actually create the file, and now I can use it in RodLab either for bending or taper translation purposes. So I'm going to close this out, and I'm going to show you one more thing you can do. Most of the time when you're working with a taper, once you've entered the taper, it doesn't allow you, the program doesn't allow you to make edits to it. That way you don't accidentally overwrite or screw something up. But say for example you did enter a taper and you did it wrong. So let's come back here. I'm going to open this window back up, and I close it and open it to clear everything out of here. It just makes me sure that I haven't accidentally entered something or left something in from a previous rod. So I'm going to go ahead and copy an existing taper, and I'm going to come back to this one I just entered. And this brings up everything here, but say for example I just learned that Kushner used, instead of a nickel silver ferrule, he actually used an aluminum ferrule. So I will come into here and change this to aluminum, and when I did that, everything stayed the same, the sizes all stayed the same, but the mass actually dropped to represent an aluminum ferrule. And again, this is a guess, but it should be a pretty good guess. So I'll come back up to the name, and I'm going to take out the copy because I really want to overwrite the current taper. And made those changes, and now I come to Save Taper, and I'll go ahead and save it, and it'll tell me it's already there, which I knew because I just created it, and yes, I would like to overwrite it. And there we go. So that's what I'd like to show you. If you have any questions, please drop me a line, and I hope this was helpful. Thank you.